Greetings, everybody. Happy Sunday. Hope everyone is well. Hope you are realizing your highest and most effective level of mental, physical, and spiritual health today. And we are so glad that you are here to join us for this very important topic, the 88th edition of Our Ancestors' Voices. Kwame Ture, formerly Stokely Carmichael, and the legacy of Black Power. What is Black Power and what does it mean for us in 2021 and beyond? And again, we're so thankful that you have decided to spend this hour with us. We want to start, as we always do, by giving thanks, respect, and acknowledgement to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And so that there's no confusion, we're talking about the American Indian people, Mexicanos, Chicanos, Puerto Ricanos. We're not talking about anybody else. You're not indigenous to the Western Hemisphere. You can look in the mirror 100 times a day and tell yourself that you are, and it doesn't change the reality that you're not. So we're talking about the actual indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We give respect and acknowledgement to them. And just chew on this for a second. If you had a loved one who was murdered on a street corner, and the state, in an effort to disguise and cover up the fact that your loved one was murdered on that street corner, they decided to make that street corner an annual celebration every year on the date that your loved one was murdered. And people would come to this intersection every year and they would have this celebration that was promoted by the state. If those people came to you and said, yeah, I understand your loved one was murdered there, but I'm not doing anything in regards to your loved one being murdered. I'm just having a celebration. No one in their right mind would ever accept that, because in your mind, you would constantly be telling yourself, the whole basis behind this is my loved one was murdered there, and they're trying to cover that up. And so it would never make sense to you to accept what people are telling you, that, well, we're not disrespecting your loved one. We're just having a celebration of our own. Because in reality, you're not just having a celebration of your own. You're being influenced by the murder of your loved one. So just think about that. That's all we'll say about that. And, you know, every time we have one of these ridiculous days that these people promoting this backward system, I'm just always glad when it's over. And I just say to our indigenous family members, that gives us another year to work on our people even more about the fallacy of thanks taking. So you can rest assured we will be doing that, as we always do. And of course, we want to give honor and respect to our African ancestors. They are the only reason why we exist here today. And we're always excited when we can do a program on one of those ancestors. And there isn't any better example of that than Kwame Ture. So we're happy to talk about him today. We're happy to talk about his work, and we're happy to hopefully provide you, with some information about it that you may not have known or may not have been able to contextualize, that can even give a broader perspective as to why we respect him the way we do. So we're thankful to all of you for joining. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Shakura. I always, give shout out to her, but, last week, if you were here last week, we have, we constantly have people that try to disrupt these programs. And that doesn't bother us because, Secretary told us that if the enemy isn't doing it against you, it's because you're not doing anything. So, as I've said many times, if I go too long without somebody trying to hate and be reactionary, I start to wonder if I'm doing things the way the ancestors want me to do them. So we don't worry about people trying to attack us. But that happened at the end of the program last week, and Shakura acted very quickly to smother that attempt so fast that probably most of you didn't even realize it was happening. So I just want to, praise her for her quick wit and ability to act and to do what needed to be done to stop that. And, to y'all, whoever it was, police, white supremacists, whoever it was this time, we'll just say to y'all got to do better. I mean, first off, you late. You came like with only 2 or 3 minutes left in the program. Like y'all much better organized than that. I mean, that's the best you can do. We already were done by the time you got in and tried to do. I mean, y'all got to do better than that. I'm disappointed that y'all are so sloppy in your efforts to sabotage us. So, we're going to keep doing what we do because we know they're going to keep doing what they do. And we're just glad that you all are here. And we want to make this next hour something that's very inspirational to you. And we will get started, as we always do, with just giving our brief introductions. Our Ancestors' Voices. This program is a program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And the All African People's Revolutionary Party is an independent, revolutionary, mass Pan-African political party based in Africa. Our objective, you all, is Pan-Africanism, which the definition of Pan-Africanism is one unified socialist Africa. We are convinced that until Africa is free, united, and socialist, African people, no matter where we live on earth, no matter what language we speak, what foods we eat, regardless of all of those things, we will never have freedom and self-determination and an ability to determine what direction we go as a people, as individuals, as family, as nations, as a worldwide people. We will never have that until Africa is free. So that is our work. And that work that we're engaged in to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare that you see on the right. And really what that book illustrated was the need to unite Pan-African forces on the ground in Africa. And that is the work that we do. That is the work that we do. I'm so disappointed because I was supposed to go to Zimbabwe last year to do work with one of our sibling parties there, the Zimbabwe Movement for Pan-African Socialists, and was prohibited because of the pandemic. And then I was really looking forward to going in a month or two. It keeps getting pushed back. And then now you have this so-called new variant of COVID. So I don't think that that's going to happen. So at some point, I know I'm in constant contact with our comrades. We'll get there, but that is our work, you all. That's the work that we're doing to create a worldwide fighting force of Pan-African revolutionaries to achieve Pan-Africanism. And our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself. My name is Ajamu, and my daughter Shakura, and we are both happy and active organizers within the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And we are proud to be here as a father-daughter team. We don't get the type of hype that father-daughters get when they're rapping together or dancing together. We get real excited about that. But when a father and daughter are together, united around organizing for liberation and dignity, that just doesn't resonate with people the same way as rapping and dancing does. But that's okay. We're going to continue to do it, and because we know this is something that definitely needs to be done. So we thank you all for being with us again. And to get us started, I will turn it over to Shakura.
Greetings, everyone. Greetings. Thank you so much for everything you said, Daddy. I really appreciate that. We're constantly being attacked, which, as you said, is a good indicator that we're doing something. And I just hope that, we continue to understand that the enemy is watching, which is a good thing, because that means that we are doing something for them to watch. But I also encourage us all to just stay vigilant, stay focused, stay safe, and be prepared. Part of why I was able to try to react as quickly as I did was because I'm suspicious, because that's not the first time that that's happened. So that means that you have to, keep your eyebrows peeled, or whatever the saying is, and just be aware of stuff and be ready to act when stuff happens. Don't, have a plan intact is what I'm saying. So thank you for saying that, Daddy. I'll be ready to do it again if I had to, and continue on, and we'll keep moving forward. I think I was in high school when you bought that license plate. It was written in Portuguese, but the translation, it was a luta continua, and it's the struggle continues. And that will always stay and resonate with me, because the struggle does continue even after we're all gone and transitioned. And our body becomes whatever we all believe our bodies become after we are no longer physically able to speak and breathe and talk and walk, and we are just spirits at that point, the struggle will still be going on. And so part of why we do what we do is because we're trying to make a better world for the children who are coming after us. We're trying to make a better world for the animals and the plants that are coming after us. We're trying to make a better world for humane people that understand that they all have a responsibility to make this world a better place. And that is the true definition of what Kwame Ture tried to live by, and displayed from the moment he was born out of his parents' womb to the moment that he transitioned off of this earth. And I'm extremely humbled and extremely grateful to not only be able to honor this comrade tonight, but to also have the opportunity to tell you that he watched me grow up. And whoever you consider to be a special person that you honor in your life, if you have so much respect, if you have so much admiration for that person, for them to be able to watch you grow up, then you understand that you were able to just sit at their feet and literally learn from them. So even though I was very, very young, I think I was like 4 or 5, I still had his influences. I remembered him sitting in the couch in the living room as I would walk by. And I'm sure I would go up and ask him a ton of questions, because that's what inquisitive 4 and 5-year-olds do, if they are privileged enough to be in an environment where their parents encourage them to ask questions. So that is what I did. And I know we took a picture, at least one, that I've seen floating around between the party's website and my dad. And so, I understand that Kwame had love, not just for the struggle and for the party, but he had love for the future. He had love for children. And he understood that the work that he was doing was a direct influence of the children to come after us. So just extremely grateful to have been on his path that motivated him to do what he was doing, because without him, we wouldn't be here in more ways than one. And so I start off by discussing the first point. And of course, I hope you all are well. I forgot to say that. I hope you all are safe and well. And so I start off by discussing the first point, where we just talk about how he was born in Trinidad, and he began learning very quickly at the age of 10 when he came to the US, just how connected and linked up oppression looks like for African people everywhere. And I just think that's really important, because Kwame was able to connect the oppression that Africans experienced in Trinidad across the world, across the waters. And when he came to the Bronx, he was able to see it. And when he started deciding what colleges he wanted to apply to, and applied to Howard and probably paid the university a visit in Washington, D.C., he was able to see how oppressed we were there. And so this idea that, unfortunately, our oppression intersects across waters, right? It intersects across oceans, it intersects across lands, that Africans are oppressed everywhere. I know that's what Marcus Garvey said when Amy Jocks wrote the book Garvey and Garveyism. And we also understand that that's what Kwame Nkrumah said when Kwame wrote the book Ghana. So, the connection that we're facing, and again, my family, the only reason I'm able to quote these people is because I'm in work study where we're enhancing our political education, and I'm reading these books. We just finished Amilcar Cabral, Return to the Source. Before that, we were reading Garvey and Garveyism. Before that, it was Kwame Nkrumah. So just extremely humbled. It was Malcolm X before, and then Kwame Nkrumah, excuse me. But my point is just extremely humbled to be able to read from our ancestors, because as I've said before, they have the keys and what we need to do. And most importantly, your brain is devoid of all relevant and factual information that's actually going to help Pan-Africanism become a reality, especially if you're relying on United States education or Western approached educations to help you grow as a person who is a socialist, right? Like that's the most backwards thing, to rely on capitalism to teach you about socialism. Good luck walking backwards. Like that's what you're doing. So super humbled to be able to be in work study where I can read about these different comrades who have worked very hard to help make the world better for us as a people, and as a poor people, as a people who might be differently abled, as LGBTQ, just different things that make us who we are. They all understood that no one deserves to be oppressed. And so what Kwame was able to do is he was able to connect that across all waters, Africans are experiencing the same level of oppression. So it doesn't matter if they're in the Bronx, it doesn't matter if they're in Trinidad, it doesn't matter if they're in Vancouver, Canada, it doesn't matter if they're in Miami. It does not matter. They are experiencing oppression. And even at the age of 10, he was able to understand that, which speaks to why the AAPRP is focused so much on working for one unified socialist Pan-Africa. And because we understand that once Africa is able to operate in a socialist manner, that's going to impact how Africans everywhere are treated, even if Africans do not all go back to Africa. That is still going to impact Africans everywhere, because as we have said before, and as we will say again, land ownership equals power, and Africans do not own their land. So as a result, we have people disrespecting Africans. We have oppression. We have disparities in everything that Africans are involved in, whether it's sports, whether it's health disparities, whether it's African children being adopted at a faster rate from European children. I mean, there are disparities all across the board. There's even disparities in how African children are given human milk from their parents, because there's less rates of African children having access to human milk than other races. So the point I'm making to you all is Kwame understood that. And that's why Kwame, even at the age of 10, was starting to dwell in the idea of Pan-Africanism, because he understood even at the age of 10, if this oppression is everywhere, what are some things that we can do to eradicate it altogether so that it can impact Africans everywhere? The next point is that he excelled in high school because he was trying to prepare how to advance his education. So once he decided on Howard, HU, stand up, once he decided on Howard, he was able to even make the connection that, there have been other warriors throughout our time who have also understood that regardless of whether they were born, it may have been a benefit for them to attend a historically African university, because then they were able to connect some other dots, organize with some other Africans on the ground, and just have some different ideologies in place. And so if you have had the opportunity of attending an HBC, then you understand what I'm talking about, especially in comparison to attending a PWI. And so, just to show this commonality between Kwame Ture attending Howard and Kwame Nkrumah attending Lincoln, they both understood that they were trying to connect, not just organizing within their own cities that they were born in, but they were also trying to organize and connect their cities and their countries across the world, because they understood that we shouldn't just help Africans in Trinidad be organized, and we shouldn't just help Africans in parts of West Africa and Ghana be organized. We really need to work on some strategies that will impact Africans everywhere, right? And so I'm going to go to this historically African university, see how much of an organizations I can involve myself in, get more involved. With Kwame Nkrumah, I'm going to join this fraternity because I'm trying to build alliances and help further enhance the organizations. And I'm trying to figure out how I can do this. And part of that means building connections. Part of that means enhancing the movement. Part of that means getting more people on deck to do the work, so that when I leave to go organize in yet another new city, this person can still manage the branch of the organization here, because they understand how important the movement is and they understand what our outcome is, okay? And so the last point I'll make, and then we'll transition to the next slide, is that it's no surprise that Kwame then joined this organization where he started doing work as a civil rights worker at Howard University. And so again, to connect it back to the AAPRP, one of the primary ways that the AAPRP recruits people now, and especially when I was just a recent child and born, is I remembered my parents taking me to college campuses. And we would find events like African Family Day at UC Davis, or we would find events at Sac State where we would have the opportunity to do mass blitzes, they called them. And so this idea of going to St. Paul Baptist Church in Oak Park, if you're familiar with Oak Park in Sacramento, I don't even know if that church is still around, I hope it is. But if you're familiar with big churches where there's a predominantly large amount of Africans, then you get up early on a Sunday morning where there's gonna be thousands of cars there, and you put flyers on every single windshield. Because what better way to organize about an event or ALD, African Liberation Day, than to just get the word out directly to the people, right? And so Kwame understood that, because he also understood that's the best way to target people is by targeting college students, because they're the most vulnerable as they're quote unquote figuring out themselves. They're enhancing their identities, changing new identities, growing, switching, learning new things, taking courses that they never thought they would take, and being influenced by professors who are wearing African medallions and wearing afros. And having this ideology checkpoint, if you will, where they're trying to now figure out, whoa, what have I been doing all this time? Because that's not working for me, and I don't want to identify with that anymore. And so Kwame understood that by working with the Civil Rights Organization in Howard, that was one way to not only enhance other college students and to get them recruited, to do civil rights work, but also to learn more about what was going on, because as I said, college students are vulnerable, and a lot of times they're ready to explore new identities. Next slide, please. All right, so Kwame paid the price, though, for all the courage, okay? He paid the price. He was tortured and imprisoned in some of the most notorious prisons in the South, like Parchman's prison in Mississippi. He truly displayed how to commit his values and his principles, though. If you need advice or someone to demonstrate for you what commitment to principles looks like, I would encourage you to enhance your political education on Kwame and to learn as much as you can. Because when you see a person who is having a debate with someone, I can't even think of the name of the video now, but my dad and I have watched it repeatedly, and it never fails that the person making the argument has a flawed argument, because their argument is that they are quote unquote Creole or Louisianan, whatever they said. And Kwame is still asking them, but how did your great-great-great-grandparents get to Louisiana, though? And so the person can't answer it because, of course, they don't have political education, and I guess they don't want to identify with being African. And so Kwame is still making the point, you still came from Africa, even though you were put on a slave ship that may have went in a different direction. You're still African. And as Kwame Nkrumah says, any African anywhere belongs to the African nation. Again, it does not matter where you were born. So Kwame understood that, and so there was political struggle within the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Integration and nonviolence as philosophies versus Black nationalism and any means necessary. The first philosophy, represented by John Lewis, the latter by Kwame Ture. Back then, he was known as Stokely Carmichael. Kwame's victory signaled a radical turn for Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and represented by the June 1966 Mississippi March, when, quote, Black Power, end quote, replaced, quote, freedom now, end quote, as the call to action within the movement. And I'll just say really quickly before I talk about the last point, you know, my dad and I have had numerous opportunities to travel throughout Mississippi. We've tried really hard to pay homage to our ancestors in Philadelphia, Mississippi, for example, and not just our African ancestors, but even some of the European comrades who were willing to die with us and to stand by our sides and fight with us, because they understood that injustice was still wrong, right? And so not only have I gone with my dad to pay homage, but a lot of times I traveled through Mississippi because, as you all know, I live in Memphis. And so it's always a trip to me driving through that state. It's such a weird and eerie state to me. Like, it's so weird. And I say that because on the one hand, it's nerve-wracking and concerning to be on the roads because the energy is alive and well of our people. You can feel it, but that energy is sorrow and pain and torment and torture. But on the other hand, you also sense that energy where our people are like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Or Ain't I a Woman, right? Or our Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, Ida B. Wells, Sojourner Truth, like that energy is bleeding on those roads, just like the energy of torment and torture. And so it's really a trip because both energies are combating one another. And so as nervous and as scared as I am driving through, I also remember where I come from because I am my ancestors and very proud to say that. And I also remember that they wouldn't let me go down without a fight because they got my back. And as I said, their energy is very much alive and well. Even if they have transitioned on, their spirits will always be there. And so we just always think about who we came from. We remember that they had survival energy. We remember that we were the ones who helped to create some of the biggest concepts known to mankind, like time, among other things. Resources that are coming from Africa, this idea of how do we function, that's because we have contributed to that. We have contributed to society and making that what it is. And so I'm saying that we come from warriors. That's what I'm saying. And that same warriorship is easily felt throughout the state of Mississippi because of people like Kwame Ture and all the work that Kwame did in terms of helping our people with their comprehension, their literacy levels. I mean, because of him, we were able to understand how to recognize the symbol of the panther. That's because of him and the work that he did and understanding that our people, unfortunately, didn't have access to be educated. And if we did, we might have been killed for it. So just being able to reach our people where they were, that's what Kwame was known for. And that's what I'm so proud and grateful to have him on his shoulders as I continue that torch. The last statement that I'll make is that, you know, we have to understand that it is a struggle in understanding his growing consciousness, which was piqued by his travels to Africa, Cuba, Vietnam, etc. Kwame decided to accept Kwame Nkrumah's offer to move to Guinea-Conakry and became his political secretary between 1968 and 1969, which of course just fueled him even more and just further exacerbated why Pan-Africanism was really the important outcome and why he needed to do more work and start to build more mass parties around the world so that he didn't have to be in all 69 countries at one time, or he didn't have to be at 2 states and 1 country and 7 cities. He could have different people delegated to continue on that work because it shouldn't just have been on him anyway. He should have been able to count on 6 or 7 other people because we all have a responsibility to make the world better, as I started off with when I first started my slide. So thank you all so much, Asante Sana, and please join an organization working for justice.
Thank you very much, Shakura. And I just wanted to, 2 points that you made, I wanted to follow up on if I can. First, on this slide, there's an error. That first point, it says Kwame was arrested 16 times for this work, voter registration work from 1961 to 1966. It was actually 26 times. So that was a fat finger error on my part. 26 times in 5 years for fighting for the right to vote. And that's important because people today want to tell me about why I should vote, and you haven't sacrificed a fingernail for it. Whereas I've been mentored by the people who've been arrested that many times for that, and they have fueled my understanding of that process. So I don't know how the hell you think I'm gonna listen to you instead of them on something like that, when they're the ones who shed blood for that process. And the other point is, you know, it's understandable to have that fear driving through Mississippi. You know, you and I have talked about this, Shakur, many times, of course. That's understandable, but you know, I know you won't forget, and I'm just saying it for everyone's benefit. Your ancestors have prepared you to travel down those roads. They have prepared you, and just remember the words of Miss Fannie Lou Hamer when the reporter asked her, was she afraid? And she said, no, I got Jesus with me. Gee, I got a shotgun in every room of my house, and I pray to Jesus, if them crackers break in here, that I have straight aim. So yeah, fear is real, but our ancestors have properly prepared us to have the ability to do what we need to do to deal with these people. And that was, if anything, was the legacy of Kwame Ture. That was certainly it. And so I want to talk a little about Kwame's contributions, specific contributions to the Black Power movement of the 1960s, and talk about it in the context of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, being founded in 1960 in Raleigh, North Carolina, at the African HBCU there, at the leadership of Comrade Sister Ella Baker, who saw the contradictions within the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the organization of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and wanted to make sure that our youth had their own voice in terms of how they wanted to engage our civil rights struggle. So she suggested that a different organization be founded outside of Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC. And so the conference at Shaw University in 1960 was the launching of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC. And that's important because even though it was a separate organization, initially the idea of SCLC was to have total political and philosophical dominance over SNCC. And in other words, to ensure that SNCC operated under the philosophy of the Southern Baptist ministers like Dr. King, the philosophy of nonviolence, and elevating this philosophy to a principle where you could never compromise. You have to be nonviolent 100% of the time, and to engage in the struggle around reform, and to base it on this concept that our strategy was to appeal to the morality of European racism. And based on that morality, we would at some point appeal to the humanity of these people, and that would eradicate their racism. That was the philosophy coming from that sector. And when Shakur talked about the struggle in SNCC between the forces that were coming to dominate that movement, that's what she's talking about, in that from the early going, the people in SNCC began to challenge that. Because unlike SCLC, who basically came to the towns, did events, and left, the SNCC organizers stayed in these Southern towns for long periods of time. They endured the day-to-day terrorism. They lived with the people, the local people who existed there. They endured the day-to-day terrorism, as Kwame and Cleve Sellers and Ruby Doris Smith Robinson and all of the SNCC workers talked about often, that they felt foolish living in these folks' houses where these folks had guns, many guns, because they had to, because they were sitting there in the center of violent white supremacy. They had to have guns to defend themselves, and telling these people that nonviolence was a principle. And they would talk about how the folks would tell them, y'all use that nonviolence all you want, as they were wrapping their shotgun, ready to putting a round in the chamber, ready to defend themselves. And this reality had a tremendous impact on the young people in SNCC, Kwame included. And so it wasn't a surprise that they invited Malcolm X to debate Bayard Rustin at Howard University in 1961. And after that happened, although this isn't widely written about, they continued to have a relationship with Malcolm X, even though they were still viewed widely as an organization heavily influenced by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his ideas. They continued to have a growing relationship with Malcolm X. And I'm talking about even to the point of having further discussions with him in the early 1960s. They began to do this. And so a number of things began to happen that influenced further SNCC's radicalization. Because of this constant debate they were having about the legitimacy of the ideas that were dominant within SCLC, they began to want to explore other options. And in 1964, Sékou Touré, the president of Guinea, the Democratic Party of Guinea, invited a SNCC delegation to come to Guinea. And Kwame Ture did not participate in that delegation. He didn't go to Africa for that. But John Lewis went, Ruby Doris Smith Robinson went, Cleve Sellers went, and other people in SNCC went. And when they came back, Kwame was heavily influenced by the reports that they gave him. John Lewis wrote in his autobiography, I can't remember, going with the whatever the wind is, something, I read it. But if you read his autobiography, he talked about how when he was in Guinea, and we all know John Lewis was certainly wasn't a revolutionary, wasn't even really progressive. But he's a hero to a lot of people because capitalism decides who's the hero and who isn't. And so they designated him the hero because he, for the bulk of his political career, operated within the system. And that's what they want everybody to see as the only legitimate option, is doing your work within the confines of the capitalist system. So he did that. But in his autobiography, he wrote about how everywhere he went in Guinea, all the people, whether they're in villages, the rural towns, Conakry, wherever they were, the first question they had for him is, what are your politics in relationship to Malcolm X? Because earlier that year, Malcolm X had done his traveling throughout Africa after he left the Nation of Islam, and he had a major influence in Africa. He had a reverberating impact in Africa. So all the youth wanted to know from these SNCC folks, how are you connected to Malcolm? And of course, John Lewis was a chief disciple of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So he talks about in his autobiography how difficult it was for him to maneuver in that environment because his ideas were not popular. And so when he came back and talked about this, Kwame was, of course, one of the people who was in that circle who was influenced by that. He was also influenced by Sister Ruby Doris Smith Robinson, one of the firing lights in SNCC. We don't know much about her, but she died at age 25 in 1967 from cancer. Fearless warrior in SNCC, was one of the most militant voices in SNCC, was talking about anti-patriarchy in SNCC in the mid-60s. She named her son after Sékou Touré. Her son is named Sékou, still to this day, had a heavy influence on Kwame Ture. And of course, Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, who talked about Stokely, they carry their babies just like we do. They look just like we do. They walk and talk just like we do over there. And further solidified in Kwame Ture's mind, as Shakura indicated, that we are one people, no matter what they tell us, no matter how they treat us, no matter where the hell they send us on earth, we're still the same people. So obviously, if that's the case, there must be something that has to be said about us finding a way to bring ourselves together. They work so hard to separate us. What would happen if we found some way to bring ourselves all back together again, focused around our mother Africa? And that was the consciousness that Kwame Ture began to develop. Now, the Black Power movement, of course, solidified that, because as Kwame Ture said himself in the late 1960s up through his death in 1998, back in those times, they saw asserting Black power as the appropriate step at that time, because they defined our condition as one of being Black people exploited by racism. And so they felt that by declaring Black power, that was a way to defend and eradicate racism. But as he himself said, human progress doesn't stand still. And so as our consciousness continued to grow, we began to understand, as Shakur said, that what we really need is not just an eradication of racism, whatever that means, but we need power. And if we have power, then we will have the ability to eradicate racism. And how do we get power? We get power through controlling land and resources. And we don't have any right to land and resources here, because this land belongs to the indigenous people. And so if we try to claim this land, we know better than the colonizers who stole it in the first place. I don't care how we justify it. We're no better than the colonizers who stole it in the first place. So the only land on earth that we have any justifiable right to is Africa. And those of us Africans here in the West, I signed nothing surrendering my right to be African and to be a part of Africa. I never signed anything doing that. My parents never signed anything. My grandparents never signed anything. My great-grandparents never signed anything. Your family never signed anything. They never asked us that. They kidnapped us and brought us here. So we have never given up our right to be connected to the African continent. And these are the things that Kwame Ture began to understand in the midst of the Pan-African, or rather the Black Power movement. These are the things that began to reverberate. So by the time he got to Guinea-Conakry, after he stopped in Hanoi during the height of the Vietnam War in 1967, and he had lunch with Nguyen Aloy Phuoc, who you know as Ho Chi Minh. He had a number of pseudonyms because U.S. imperialism was always trying to assassinate him. So he had a number of pseudonyms, and Ho Chi Minh was just one of his pseudonyms. His born name was Nguyen Aloy Phuoc. And so when Kwame Ture, then Stokely Carmichael, went to Hanoi in '67 and had lunch with Nguyen Aloy Phuoc, he sat there with him and he explained to him his confusion about what to do. He was disillusioned with his work in the Black Panther Party. He felt like the Black Panther Party was a very positive organization. And although it's not often talked about, Kwame Ture played a major role in making the Black Panther Party a national organization. If you talk to the original Black Panther Party members who were active in the organization, they will tell you that. Elaine Brown will tell you that. Emory Douglas, they will all tell you that. I've heard that from their own lips. So he was not against the Black Panther Party. That's an FBI law that's put out there to try to create dissension among our people. But he was disillusioned somewhat ideologically with the direction, not because he was against the Black Panther Party, but because he felt that there was something else that his work should have driven him to do. And so he asked Ho Chi Minh, Nguyen Aloy Phuoc, about it. And Nguyen Aloy Phuoc looked at him at the lunch table and told him, "You're African, why don't you go home to Africa?" A little Vietnamese man told him that. "You're African, so why don't you go home to Africa?" This Vietnamese man who lived in Harlem and washed dishes in Harlem and used to sit on the corner and listen to Marcus Garvey speak, understood clearly who we were and what we needed to do. He didn't tell him, "Well, you're African American, so what you need to do is get some people in Congress and try." He didn't tell him none of that nonsense. He told him the truth. "You're African, why don't you go to Africa?" And that's exactly what Kwame Ture did. He went to Guinea, where Kwame Nkrumah was, because he was forced to go to Guinea after the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, or we call them criminals in action. They illegally overthrew his democratically elected government in Ghana on February 24th, 1966. And Sekou Ture invited him to come to Guinea and told him, we will make you president of Guinea. They can't defeat us. They can take away your presidency in Ghana. We'll make you president of Guinea. And there was a language barrier, but once Kwame Nkrumah understood what Sekou Ture was saying, he told him, I can't do that. The people elected you as president. So Sekou Ture said, that's fine, we'll make you co-president. So Kwame Nkrumah became co-president of Guinea, becoming the only person in human history to be president of two different countries. And he invited Kwame Ture, then Stokely Carmichael, to come there and become his political secretary to build Pan-Africanism. Guinea at that time was the base, one of the major bases for liberation movements. Amilcar Cabral was there. Shakur mentioned they just read his book in their work study circle. And Amilcar Cabral had founded the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, the PAIGC. He had co-founded the Popular Movement for Liberation of Angola. Frelimo from Mozambique was there. ZANU from Zimbabwe was there. They were all getting resources and support from the Democratic Party of Guinea and Sekou Ture. And so Kwame Ture, then Stokely Carmichael, went there at the invitation of Kwame Nkrumah to be his secretary. Kwame Nkrumah, 4 years before that, had invited Malcolm X to do the same thing. And it told Malcolm X that our intelligence sources tell us you will be assassinated if you return to the US. And Malcolm told him, I know, but I have to go back. And that's just an unfortunate part of history. But fortunately for us, the young Stokely Carmichael agreed to stay in Guinea-Conakry and work for Pan-Africanism. And so Kwame Nkrumah gave him the manuscript, the unpublished manuscript of the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare that you see at the top left-hand corner. And the young Stokely Carmichael read the entire manuscript in one night. And then they agreed to meet. And they had the first work study circle for the All-African People's Revolutionary Party in 1968 in Guinea-Conakry at the Villa Sile, which is where Kwame Nkrumah was living in Guinea. And that work study circle consisted, at least, we know, of Kwame Nkrumah, who had the assignment from the group to return to power in Ghana. It consisted of Amilcar Cabral, who, as I mentioned, was founder of PAIGC and co-founder of the MPLA. And his assignment was to run the damn Portuguese out of Africa. And Kwame Ture, who was then Stokely Carmichael, and a young man who was 17 at the time, who unfortunately made his physical transition just 3 years ago, Brother Lamine Janga from Gambia, who walked all the way from Gambia to Guinea to work with Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Ture. Those four were in the first work study circle. And Kwame Ture and Lamine Janga's assignment was to start the All-African People's Revolutionary Party outside of Africa. Now, we know, unfortunately, Kwame Nkrumah never returned to Ghana. He never set foot in the country of his birth again. And that's unfortunate. He was never able. And to this day, Ghana remains neo-colonialist, as it has been since his government was overthrown in 1966. But Cabral was, of course, successful. We ran the Portuguese out of Africa. They ain't been back since. They can't even come and visit no more. Get out of Africa. And he was very successful in accomplishing that. And of course, the young Stokely Carmichael and Lamine Janga were successful. And thank God they were, because had they not started the AAPRP outside of Africa, Lord knows I'd probably be in some prison cells or something worse by now. So thank God they were successful in starting the AAPRP in the Western Hemisphere. And that was the work that he engaged in. And so when we talk about uniting the Pan-African revolutionary forces all throughout the African world, Kwame Ture became a central committee member of the Democratic Party of Guinea, Sekou Toure's political party in Guinea, as well as being a central committee member of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. And we've been able to continue to build based on that model. We have organizers today who are organizers in the AAPRP, as well as the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, South Africa. We have organizers who are organize on the Central Committee of the PAIGC today, who are also on the Central Committee of the APRP. We continue to engage in that level of unity work today. And that was the vision of Kwame Ture that he followed up from Kwame Nkrumah. And we're very proud of that. And some of those things that we want to highlight is we call it the All-African Committee for Political Coordination. That's the body that will come about through the unification of all the Pan-African revolutionary formations in Africa. And once we have an AACPC, which will reflect those organizations that we mention all the time, that will be the finished product of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. That's why we always say we're building the party. That's why we say it. None of us say, well, the party's here. We're ready to create revolution today. We don't even talk like that because we understand revolution is a process and we're building for revolution. So that's why when people say things to us like, well, why did you organize on a college? Then we know they don't understand strategy. It was not about saying college students are more oppressed. That's absurd. It was never about that. It was just about getting people who, as Shakur mentioned, were struggling around ideas and hopefully picked up some skills and convincing them to commit class suicide so that they can engage in propaganda to influence the hearts and minds of the African masses. That was always the only reason for organizing college students. And I know that because I was recruited into the APRP while a college student and continue to go up to college campuses up to the present day, recruiting people to join the APRP. So I know that what that strategy is. It was never about, people try to tell me, well, Du Bois is talented. It was never about us being the leaders. We're organizers. We've never called ourselves leaders. We've always said we were organizers. And what do organizers do? They light the fire. The masses of people are the leaders. That's always been our line. Anybody trying to say anything different, they're just not paying attention. We know exactly what we're trying to do, and that's what we're doing. We have a number of strategies to do it, and none of that is going to be on CNN and BBC. None of that is going to be on there. And the minute it is on there, we got to start looking at what the hell we're doing wrong, because our work is about working with the African masses. That's why you'll never see us organizing, and nothing against people that do, because all kind of work is needed and necessary. I'm just trying to explain to you the vision of Kwame Ture. You'll never see us organizing events at state capitals or at the White House or anything like that. You'll never see us doing that because we're not trying to make a demand of the capitalist system. We're trying to organize our people to overthrow the capitalist system. So we have rallies, we do that, but we do them in African communities. We do them amongst our people because we're trying to organize the African masses. We don't give a damn what Joe Biden thinks or what Kamala Harris. We don't give a damn what those people think about us. We're thinking about them about as much as they're thinking about us. Not at all. We don't care a damn about whether they convict Kyle Rittenhouse or not. It's a white supremacist. What do you think they're gonna do? I actually, to be honest with you all, I wish the judges in these cases would just get up there on the stand with a white sheet on and a hood. And I wish they would just say, I don't know what you ends thought was going to happen here. These white folks killed y'all. We not only setting them free, we're giving them a $300,000 bonus. I wish they would do that. I sincerely do wish that, because that sometimes seems to be the only way that we'll ever wake up and stop living in this fantasy world that we're living in and thinking we have rights and they got to respect our rights. They don't even see you as human beings. They don't respect your rights. And this is what Kwame was trying to get us to understand when he said that we're trying to use nonviolence. Nonviolence is a tactic designed to appeal to people's morality. And he said the problem in America is that it has no morality. So we still don't understand that. We still think that we can appeal to these people, we can fit in. Some of us aren't trying to fit in. Some of us are trying to destroy that and create something better. And that's what Kwame was trying to say to us, you all. So in 1977, Stokely Carmichael changed his name to Kwame Ture to honor Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré, and to continue that work. in the Democratic Party of Guinea where he lived, and in the APRP, and do all of that. And that's exactly right. And I just want to quickly quote our good comrade friend, Comrade Cole from the American Indian Movement and the runners. And he said here in Facebook, he quotes Kwame, he talks about if a white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. If he's got the power to lynch me, that's my problem. And that's exactly right. That's exactly what Kwame said. Because he came to, again, understand that our problem is that we need power. It's not just that, well, white people don't like us. Look, we don't give a damn. I couldn't care less if white people like me. Who cares whether they like? I don't need them. I don't need them for anything. If they don't like me, so what? Who cares? And I would say that overwhelming majority of Africans, that's true. We don't care if you like us. We don't even know if we like you. It's not even the point of that. The point is that we don't want to be in a position where the actions you take against us, we don't have any recourse to defend ourselves because the system stands on the side of white supremacy against us. That's the concern that we have. That's what Kwame's talking about in that quote. Look, we're good-looking people. We're smart people. We have great personalities. We don't need you. You don't like us, stay the hell away from us. But don't try to block our path or else we'll put you down. And when we do that justifiably, then we want to be able to build a system that will acknowledge that and won't just always be stacked against our favor. That's what we have a problem with. It's not about nobody liking nobody and validating nobody. That's like every time you try to say something, well, explain it to me. I'm European the other day. Well, explain this to me. I'm like, I'm not your instructor. Get off. I told him, get off here. I can introduce you to people that were there. If you think I'm lying, I told them, get off your lazy ass and read. I'm not your instructor. That's your problem now. You're so damn lazy and entitled. I'm not telling you anything. I already know it. What I need to, how am I benefiting telling you? You get it. You get it yourself. So that's the spirit of independence that Kwame Ture was trying to get us to understand. And so just looking at Kwame's legacy, some of the things that he left with us, certainly political education is essential. And a lot of that he was able to understand from his experiences within the Black Panther Party. And I know a lot of us want to romanticize the Black Panther Party, and nobody loves the Black Panther Party any more than I do. I grew up mentored by Black Panthers. I have Black Panthers who are a heavy influence in my life, always have been. I probably wouldn't even be in the APRP if it wasn't for Black Panthers like my big brother Akinsanya Cambone. So, he was a Black Panther. They tried to send him to prison, said he killed a police officer here in Sacramento in 1969. It was hardcore Black Panther. My big brother Omawali, that passed away last year, founded the Black Panther chapter here. These people mentored me in this movement. Not to mention Kwame Ture and David Brothers, who started the Brooklyn Black Panther Party chapter. So you don't respect the Black, but you don't know what the hell you're talking about. We love the Black Panther Party. We've not been here. Sister Gloria Abernathy here, who was a Black Panther here in Sacramento. I got my political teeth grown under these people. I owe them everything. Brother Sekou Neblin in Ghana, my big brother. I stay with him when I go to Ghana all the time. I would never disrespect their contribution. But one of the things Kwame learned is that political education was uneven and inconsistent. And it was one of the main reasons that COINTELPRO was so successful in destabilizing the Black Panther Party. And anybody that studies the Black Panther Party cannot deny that. And even all of the Black Panther Party members themselves have acknowledged that in their writings. Assata Shakur in her book certainly said that. Elaine Brown, Geronimo G. Jaga, Kwame Ture, David Hilliard, Bobby Seale, even Huey P. Newton, they all acknowledge that. So don't argue with me, do your research so you can understand it better. So Kwame understood that, and that's why he made sure to ensure that political education is institutionalized within the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. Shakur talked about it. She had her work study yesterday. I had mine last week. Everybody in the party has to be in a consistent work study circle, including Kwame Ture when he was alive. That's our legacy. We want every African on earth to participate in a process like that. We think that it's essential. So that's clearly one of his most important legacies. And then also that the key rather to African people everywhere is this total liberation and unification of Africa under one continental socialist government. A lot of misinformed people say, well, Stokely Carmichael abandoned Black power. That anybody that says that, you know immediately they haven't really looked seriously at any of this history we're talking about here. Because we would argue correctly that Pan-Africanism is the highest expression of Black power. So the question as to what does Black power look like in 2021 and beyond is it looks like Pan-Africanism, because our struggle is a struggle for land and resources. And Africa is the only place where we can get land and resources legitimately. So our struggle is to liberate Africa. That's the highest expression of Black power. And that's one of the legacies that Kwame Ture helped us to come to understand. And also that white supremacy and patriarchy are appendages of the capitalist system. And that revolutionary organizing work to eradicate capitalism is the only way you're going to eradicate white supremacy and patriarchy. Kwame Ture was a clear supporter of the establishment of the All-African Women's Revolutionary Union, the women's wing in the APRP in 1980, was a strong supporter of developing our women's union. And the reason why is because he understood that, as I'm saying, that we have to have an organized force against capitalism. We can't just say, well, the fight is for women and marginalized genders to make as much money as men. Capitalism will give us that reform if it can maintain its system. We can't just say, well, the fight is to stop police from wholesale killing us, and the way to do that is to get African police on police forces everywhere. Capitalism will give us that, but it'll never stop the problem, because the problem isn't the issue of just police, isn't the issue of unfair wages. It's all of those are simply manifestations of the capitalist system. So this was the legacy of Kwame Ture, is understanding that we have to organize against capitalism. That's why you want to, the APRP people always talking about capitalism. That's why, because that's the problem. And in order to have a solution, you got to recognize clearly what the problem is. The problem is, say it after me, capitalism. It's got to be destroyed. That is what our work is. So if you want to know what the legacy of Kwame Ture is in one sentence, is join an organization, working for our people. And by doing that, we make ourselves stronger so that we can continue to get closer to eradicating this backward system and building one unified socialist Africa. And so we want to thank you all for being with us today. We want to invite you back next week, Sunday, December 5th. We are going to talk about why we African revolutionaries support the Irish Republican socialist struggle. We know that's going to be a hot one, because I know a lot of us can't stomach that. We can't understand it. What you talking about supporting them white people? And we're going to explain to you why, because we have a very good reason why, and you that oppose that don't have a reason why not. So we're going to explain why. So we invite you to join us next week for that, because white people are not our enemies just because they're white. And every African is not our family just because they're Black. I mean, we are way past that juvenile level of consciousness. We understand that there's a class war going on in this world. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. And we invite you to please shop at our APRP Forward Ever Shop. There's the link right there. You see a picture of me skinning and grinning in my African period hoodie. You can get one. There's all types of items like that on the site. Support independent revolutionary African organization. You know where our money goes. We're getting ready to have a party congress in Africa next year. We have to pay for all our comrades all over Africa to travel to where we're having our congress. So we need your support. So help us through the Forward Ever Shop to do that. Please, please, please spread the word and help us. Stop talking about buy Black business that ain't doing nothing for our people. And if you're gonna support some of them, do that, but they require that they do something for our people. Otherwise, what's different about them from any other capitalist business? But you know if you support us, you know where the money's going. And if you don't, we can certainly show you. So support our shop, please. Go to aprp-intl.org, join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Many people are doing that. We appreciate it. Go to betterworld.me. If you want more information about us, the white supremacists that tried to sabotage us last week, you want to send us more hate mail, that would be don't send the white supremacists, don't send the hate mail to the APRP site because it takes too long to get to us. So if you want to get to us directly, go to betterworld.me and spread your hate there. That's the place you want to. We don't want to pollute our APRP site with that. So go there and do that. And I'm an editor on the editorial team with hoodcommunist.org. African writings, and don't take your nonsense there either, okay? Because we don't have time for it. So we're printing articles by African revolutionary voices all over the world. We have a bi-monthly Telegram event. Download Telegram free on your smartphone, and you can listen in. We'll be there this Friday at 7:30 Pacific time with a topic of interest. So come on there. Not you white supremacists. We'll kick you off. You won't be allowed to participate. But everybody else, you're welcome to come. And then we have all these other broadcasts here, APRP Tantula, Revolutionary African Women, Forward Ever broadcast, APRP New Mexico news broadcast, Thursdays at noon Mountain Time. All of these are APRP broadcasts, so check them out. Continue to buy my book there on the right, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. I'm working with 4 different groups of people all around the country trying to help folks get organized around revolutionary programs based in political education and work. So I finance a lot of that work from the little proceeds I get from the book. I'll just say this one thing. I got a $70 royalty deposit into my account Friday. I used half of that to make copies for my community defense training yesterday. I also paid for my Zoom account that I used to do this right here. As well as, spending money on a couple of, that was all the $70. So, you want to know where the money goes, that's where it goes. So help us, please have people buy the book. We appreciate it. We appreciate you, except the white supremacists and the police and all the other bottom shoe scum on the earth. But we appreciate everybody else. We love you. Thank you. Stay strong. Don't let them get you down. We are winning. Forward ever. Backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening.